Okay, so you're planning that dream trip to Maui, got the flights, maybe the hotel, but then there's the rental car.
Right. The essential piece.
And figuring out the best deal, when to book, airport or off airport.
Yeah.
It can feel, well, a bit overwhelming, like driving the Hana Highway blindfolded, maybe?
It really can. I mean, the market changes constantly. Demand, supply, what the companies are doing, it shifts.
Yeah.
What you really need is the key info, like distilled down, so you can make a good decision without having to dig through tons of data yourself.
Exactly. And that's the mission for this deep dive. We've got a bunch of source material here, detailed data, forecasts, analysis, all focused on Maui car rentals right now, early June 2025. So we're going to unpack it for you, pull out the really important stuff, give you a clear picture of what's happening, and, maybe what to expect.
Okay, let's do it. So first, the current snapshot. What's the data showing for this past week? That's the week of June 9th, 2025.
Right.
The big picture, prices are holding pretty steady, kind of typical low season levels, actually.
Okay, steady baseline. But digging in a bit, there were a couple of really, standout moves for certain types of cars this week, weren't there?
Absolutely. Yeah, while the average was stable, Jeeps jumped quite a bit, up 27%.
Okay.
And on the flip side, minivans dropped sharply, like a huge 48% plunge.
Whoa, 48% down for minivans in just 1 week. That's massive. What's the deal with those big swings when everything else is supposedly stable?
Well, the analysis suggests they're basically market corrections.
Huh?
Jeeps apparently had been priced unusually low before, maybe something to do with inventory, like processing new cars coming in. So that 27% jump looks like the price just getting back to where you'd kind of expect it.
Right, normalizing.
Exactly. And minivans, they had this weird price spike the week before, so this big drop is just bringing them back down into a, normal early summer range.
Gotcha.
So with those two adjusting, pretty much every vehicle category is now sitting comfortably within its typical band for early June.
Okay, so those were just outliers sorting themselves out. Let's get specific then on those normal levels. At the main airport, OGG Kahului, what were the absolute lowest prices you could find this past week for a 1-week rental?
Okay, for the week of June 9th, the data shows. Economy cars, the cheapest was $236 a week.
$236, okay.
Mid-size cars, $276 a week. Jeeps, even after that price hike, $426 a week.
Still quite a jump from midsize.
Oh, yeah. Convertibles, they were the priciest, $631 a week.
Makes sense.
SUVs, standard ones, $308. The 7-seater SUVs were $355 a week. And then minivans after that big correction, $393 a week.
All right, so those are the bottom line numbers. But the really interesting thing you mentioned, which company was offering those rock bottom prices?
Yeah, this is the fascinating part this week. It was Thrifty.
Thrifty.
Every single one of those low prices we just listed. Economy, mid-size, Jeep, convertible, SUV, 7-seater, minivan. All Thrifty.
Wow.
The source specifically calls it an unusual sweep. Normally, you see different companies being cheapest for different types of cars.
A complete Thrifty sweep. What does that signal? What's going on there?
Yeah, it's not typical. It really suggests an aggressive move by Thrifty. The source material describes the current demand environment as relatively weak.
Meaning fewer bookings than expected.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in that kind of market, a sweep like this looks like Thrifty saying, okay, we're going to grab market share. We'll just be the cheapest, period, across the board.
It makes you wonder if the others, Hertz, Avis, Enterprise, are they going to have to react? Cut their prices too?
That's the big question this raises, isn't it? And it ties right into what we might see coming up next.
Perfect segue. Let's shift gears then. What about the forecast? What are the sources predicting for the rest of June and then looking into July?
Okay, the overall forecast, pretty stable for the rest of June. It doesn't look like any major price swings are expected this month.
Steady as she goes for June. But July always brings the Independence Day rush, right?
Yeah.
The holiday peak.
Exactly. Higher prices are definitely expected right around July 4th. That's just standard seasonal stuff. The forecast data actually gives specific projected prices if you book in advance for rentals starting various weeks in June and July.
And this is where it gets really surprising. Looking at the data this week, that forecast price for the peak July 6 week, it actually dropped a lot compared to what that same week was priced at just last week.
It's a huge drop. The forecast for renting starting July 6th, it's down 28% at the airport, OGG, compared to last week's forecast for that same date.
28%?
And off airport. Even bigger.
Yeah.
Down 38% for rentals starting July 6th.
That is wild. For a peak holiday week price to drop that much before you even get close, that's not just normal fluctuation. What's the thinking behind that? Why the sudden drop in the July 4th forecast?
Well, the likely reason, according to the analysis, is that the pricing systems, whether they're fancy algorithms or actual people,
Right.
they seem to be seeing unexpectedly weak demand signals specifically for that July 4th holiday period.
Ah, fewer bookies coming in than they thought.
Seems like it. Fewer than expected, maybe. So they're lowering those advance prices now to try and, drum up some business, even for what's usually a super busy time.
I see. So the system's reacting to what's actually happening or not happening with bookings, and linking this back to that thrifty sweep, this unexpected weakness around July 4th, that could be a wider signal, couldn't it?
It absolutely could, yeah. This week's signal for a major holiday. It might suggest we could see broader price cuts across more companies this summer, not just thrifty being aggressive this one week.
Interesting. So signs of softness even heading into a peak. Okay, what about booking timing? We've talked before about how sometimes, waiting closer to the date has actually been cheaper than booking way out. That trend started around mid-December 2024. Is that still the case?
That trend has definitely been a thing, yeah. But the data this week, it shows that gap between booking last minute and booking further out. It's narrowed quite a bit.
Okay, the gap is smaller. Is that because the last-minute prices shot up?
No, and that's the key thing here. It's not that last-minute prices surged. It's more that the prices further out, the advance prices, were already kind of low,
Right.
uncharacteristically weak, the source says.
Can you give us a specific example from this week's data?
Sure. So look at a rental starting June 9th. That's basically last minute from when the data was pulled. Okay, 5 weeks before June 9th, the advance price for that week at OGG Airport was $251.
$251 5 weeks out.
Right. Then, over those 5 weeks, the price kind of meandered, stayed in a narrow range, and the final last-minute price was $236.
Okay, so only a $15 saving compared to 5 weeks before.
Exactly. Not a huge last-minute score. And it was similar off-airport, only a $16 saving compared to booking 5 weeks prior.
So for this specific week at least, waiting didn't save you much because the advance prices were already pretty low, and the systems kind of nailed the demand estimate early on.
Pretty much. It suggests the forecast for that week was quite stable over the previous month or so.
Got it. Now, location. The classic advice for Maui is often, rent off airport, it's cheaper. Is that still holding true?
Generally, yeah, that's the rule of thumb. And it's usually because of, well, two things. Off-airport places don't usually have the same high taxes and fees you pay right at the airport.
Right, those airport fees.
Plus, companies often charge a bit extra for the convenience of picking up right there at OGG, a convenience premium.
But I seem to remember the data showed that wasn't always the case earlier this year. Sometimes off-airport was more expensive.
You're right, yeah. Back in the winter and spring of 2025, that pattern got disrupted. The data showed sometimes off-airport prices were higher. Maybe demand spiked there, or they had supply issues at those specific locations.
Okay, so what's the situation this week? Is the normal pattern off-airport cheaper back?
Mostly, yes. For the most part, the usual pattern holds. Off-airport is cheaper this week for economy, midsize convertibles, and standard SUVs.
For the most part. Sounds like there are exceptions again.
There are. This week, Jeeps and minivans. They're actually cheaper at the airport. OGG is cheaper than off-airport for those two.
That's totally counterintuitive. Why would Jeeps and minivans buck the trend this week? Cheaper at the airport.
The most likely reason, based on the analysis, seems to be supply. It looks like Jeeps and minivans are just in shorter supply at the off-airport spots right now.
Scarcity drives up the price there.
Exactly. While availability seems better at the airport, which keeps the prices relatively lower there just for those specific vehicle types.
Wow. It's fascinating how specific vehicle supply can just flip the usual advice on its head. And this comparison covers, 14 companies? Airport, town, resorts.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad look at the
It
location.
really shows you got to check both, especially if you need a minivan or want a Jeep this week.
Definitely worth comparing. Don't just assume off-airport is always the winner.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Put Maui in context with the rest of Hawaii. How do the rental costs compare across the islands right now?
So the data includes a quick check of the cheapest one-week rental costs at the 5 main airports, again for June 9th. The numbers look like this. Honolulu, H&L on Oahu was $312.
Okay.
Maui, OGG, was $236.
Our baseline.
Luhu, LIH on Kauai, $264. Kona, KOA on the Big Island, $248. And Hilo, ITO, also on the Big Island, $259.
Honolulu and Kauai seem a bit higher than the others there.
They actually saw pretty big corrections down this week, according to the source. Honolulu dropped a massive 58% to get to $312.
Wow, 58%.
Yeah, bringing it back closer to normal after being really high.
Yeah.
Kauai also dropped 25%. Maui, Kona, and Hilo only had minor changes this week.
And the main takeaway from comparing those islands?
Maui's airport, OGG, is still the cheapest of all the major islanders for renting a car.
Still number one.
Yep, this makes it the 11th week in a row it's held that cheapest spot. Although, gotta say, this week it's only slightly cheaper than Kona. Just
Yeah.
$12 difference.
11 weeks straight is quite a run for Maui being the value leader. Okay, just quickly, for anyone wondering where all this super specific data comes from,
Right, the source material is the blog of Frank's Friendly Cars, Maui Car Rental.
Frank's Friendly Cars.
Yeah, they're an independent local company, been operating on Maui since 2006. They explain how they get the data, basically. They track prices every week. Since July 2024, they've tracked 7 vehicle types from 10 major companies just at OGG.
10 companies, 7 categories every week.
Yep. And for economy cars, their data goes back even further to July 2023. They also did a big 5-year study before that, 2013 to 2018, so they have long-term context.
So this isn't just, a random check online. It's consistent, structured tracking from a local company that knows the market.
Exactly. It gives their findings a lot of credibility and a really grounded, long-view perspective on what's happening in Maui.
Definitely. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Bring it all together for you, the listener, thinking about that Maui trip. What are the absolute must-know takeaways from this deep dive?
Okay, key points. Right now, Maui car rental prices are pretty stable and relatively low. Think early low season levels.
Good news there.
The big news this week was that Thrifty Sweep, lowest price in every category. That suggests they're playing hardball for market share because demand seems a bit weak right now.
Right. And looking ahead.
June looks pretty steady price-wise. July will have the usual holiday spike around the 4th, and this is but the advanced forecast prices for that July 4th peak actually dropped a lot this week compared to last week's forecast.
Signaling weaker than expected holiday demand, maybe?
Yeah, that's what it looks like, yeah. Also, booking timing. The gap between last-minute and advanced booking savings narrowed this week, mostly because advanced prices were already low.
And location.
Off-airport is still generally cheaper, but not for Jeeps and minivans this week. Those were cheaper at the airport, likely due to off-airport supply issues for those types.
Don't forget the island comparison.
Oh, right. And Maui, OGG, is still the cheapest Hawaiian Island airport for rentals. That's 11 weeks running now, though Kona is very close behind this week.
So, knowing all these dynamics, the thrifty move, the July 4th, softness, the location quirks, it really helps you make smarter choices when you actually go to book that car.
Absolutely. It gives you context for the prices you're seeing.
Makes the whole thing feel less like guesswork, less like that blindfolded Honda drive. Which leaves us with maybe one final thought for you to chew on. Given Thrifty's really aggressive pricing and these hints of weak demand, even for the peak July 4th period, how might the whole pricing landscape shift across all the rental companies in Maui over the next few weeks? Are we heading into a summer price war, or will demand suddenly pick up and push everything higher again?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Something definitely worth watching.
Indeed, especially as you plan that perfect Maui escape.